wondered why the bench at the Metro is so weird. I mean, Boston's not known for being a very picturesque city, but these arm bars are just plain ugly looking and weird.
What are you filming? What are you filming that for? Film over here. Yeah, come on. I've got this bench in my room, but it's not got those weird dividers.
Are you sure?
Yes, I'm sure. Are you referring to this stuff?
Yeah.
Well, I can move this stuff. It's not like those arm bars on the T station.
Yeah, you should clean it up.
Well, I'll clean you up! But this bench is just plain uncomfortable. Might need a chiropractor after this. And as it turns out, this is actually completely by design.
Across the United States, cities are drawing new borders, not with walls, but with design choices in the physical architecture. And the more you look, the more inescapable it becomes.
Commuters leaving Alewife Station saw it for months. Right under Route 2, homeless were living perched on a concrete slab until MassDOT installed these spikes mid-December, a homeless deterrent some call inhumane.
Spikes that would hurt people seems like a bad idea.
But the history of excluding so-called undesirable bodies goes much deeper.
Hi there. I'm independent political researcher and overzealous Harvard student Derek Yuan. Today, I'm on a mission to find out more about where all of this stuff comes from. But to do that, we have to go all the way back to colonial times.
As it turns out, vagrancy laws have been around forever. They were imported over from England in an attempt to maintain a specific social order, just like tea and bad weather.
I'm not actually English, so don't look at me like that.
We can go as far back as the Articles of Confederation. Here, paupers and vagabonds were excluded from the privileges of free citizens, including free movement between states. But during the 1800s, the country began to see sweeping social shifts. Millions of slaves were freed after the Civil War. On top of that, tens of millions of European immigrants began streaming in, beginning from Northern and Western Europe, but eventually shifting towards the Eastern and Southern European countries. New York, a major entry point for new immigrants, passed a law in 1824. The captain of each ship had to pay a bond of up to $300 for each passenger, in case they became a public charge to the city within 2 years. Immigrants quickly became associated with poverty and vagrancy, and eventually most US states had some form of these restrictions. Alabama's law, in particular, clearly spells out the conditions for being a public charge: a lunatic, maimed, aged, infirm, or vagrant person. In Virginia, the Vagrancy Act of 1866 gave local authorities the power to arrest people and compel them into labor if they appeared to be homeless or unemployed. In effect, this meant that hundreds of thousands of recently freed African Americans were forced into a new form of servitude, often with unfavorable labor contracts. Mississippi's black codes, however, took it a step further. Under these vagrant laws, all freemen were forced to carry papers proving employment, else they could be arrested, fined, or forcibly hired out to their former enslavers. One Supreme Court case during this time period spells out the leading attitude towards vagrancy laws. Justice Philip Barber, writing for the majority opinion, observed that we think it is as competent and as necessary for a state to provide precautionary measures against the moral pestilence of paupers, vagabonds, and possibly convicts, as it is to guard against the physical pestilence of infectious disease. In the late 19th century and early 20th centuries, cities took this even further with something called ugly laws. Oh, did you just zoom in on me?
Yeah.
Why would you do that?
It's pretty obvious.
Are you calling me ugly?
Yeah,
That's up.
you'd be a felony.
Okay, that was good, but that was really up. My producer may think she has a sense of humor, but ugly laws were anything but a joke. Pioneered by San Francisco, these laws forbade anyone from exposing himself or herself to public view if they were diseased, maimed, mutilated, or in any way deformed so as to be an unsightly or disgusting object. Yikes, I mean, come on. Some of my roommates are quite difficult to look at, but even I wouldn't go as far as saying that they can't exist in public. Jokes aside, this is a serious matter. There's something really, really wrong with calling someone who has a disease or disability an unsightly or disgusting object. Here was a man who was removed from the streets of Cleveland due to its unsightly beggar ordinance. There's nothing ugly about him. In 1972, the Supreme Court finally struck down vagrancy laws, declaring them excessively vague and unconstitutional. By then, vagrancy laws had already been undermined by a series of legal battles. Papa Christou v. City of Jacksonville sounded the death knell for the historical regime of vagrancy laws in America. Today, the exclusion has evolved. As mounting legal challenges and changing social norms made it more difficult to criminalize presence directly, cities began to use physical design as a new way to exclude. Instead of overt laws, cities use hostile architecture, designing public spaces to be uncomfortable or inaccessible for unhoused people. These design choices act as spatial ordinances, enforcing the same exclusionary goals as vagrancy and ugly laws, but through the built environment rather than the criminal code. It's quite difficult for politicians to pass laws that directly criminalize people for being homeless or disabled in public. But it's a lot easier to design things that make their presence a lot more difficult. As the law professor Sarah Schindler argues, this new architectural regulation is just as powerful as law, but less identifiable to us. As a result, courts have historically undervalued and almost ignored the exclusionary potential of architectural choices. The impulse to police public spaces has adapted over time, even as the tools change. Today's hostile architecture draws invisible borders in public space, borders that seek to keep out the poor, unhoused, and marginalized. As it turns out, it wasn't just me who was peeved by these arm bars.
Yeah, Audrey, the T says those armrests do serve a purpose, but the thieves say they only hurt homeless people, and that is why they want them gone now. A group calling itself Schlubs for Housing claimed responsibility for the thefts in a Twitter post. That group even posted this photo showing a pile of all the stolen armrests. The group says,
but there was also serious backlash.
If they're homeless, they should go to a shelter.
Just thinking a lot better. A lot bigger fish to fry, a lot better causes to espouse.
I think it's wrong.
In general, we know that homelessness is associated with various dangers and perils.
Last week, she says 2 homeless men were fighting in front of her home.
Tent after tent, open drug dealing, drug use, and a whole host of other safety issues.
There's a man throwing knives in front of our door.
Normally, Bonnie says, her business off Larkin is the backdrop of a rolling crime scene. Assaults, drug dealing, vandalism, and break-ins.
Fernanda Morales rarely walks to school anymore.
If I do have to carry my pepper spray, which is obviously not something I hope to use, and it's not something...
Fernanda says she was followed one day by a man who came out of an RV that was parked in front of her school.
There are serious concerns about public safety and sanitation. That much can't be denied. But the solution isn't simply out of sight, out of mind. Hostile architecture
doesn't reduce homelessness, it just makes it less visible.
But there is a better way. Permanent supportive housing, which pairs affordable housing with voluntary services, has been proven to reduce homelessness and lower public costs. In general, expanding mental health care, harm reduction programs, and low-barrier shelter options addresses the upstream causes of homelessness, not just its symptoms. The philosopher Jeremy Waldron poses an interesting question.
The usage of private property is restricted to its owner. Therefore, common property, including streets, sidewalks, transit stations, and parks, is effectively the only space in which homeless people can physically be.
Restrictions on existing in public, then, function as restrictions on unhoused people's ability to exist, which is unjust. The solution cannot be to simply criminalize their existence.
To truly address homelessness, we must loosen these borders, invest in proactive solutions, and reclaim public spaces for all.